Hi, we're here for a Father's Day conversation with Woody and Bryan Turner. It's a father-son team who are law partners here in downtown Leesburg. They both had very interesting journeys along the way and have been at the front lines of many of the major community debates here in Loudoun over the past several decades. Woody, you grew up in a farming community. Your dad was an extension agent here in the county.
That's right. When I was hardly talking, my father moved to Loudoun County. The war had just ended in 1945, and he went to Virginia Tech, became a agriculture agent, extension agent for Virginia Tech, and in 1949 he brought my sister and I and my mother to Luckett's, and he started out as the county agriculture agent. I think he was an assistant to begin with. And we didn't live long in Luckett's, so we moved to Hamilton, and I went to Hamilton Grade School. And then while my father was, well, first of all, if you came to Loudoun County in 1949 or 50, it would have taken 20 years before you were accepted. I mean, the society was just closed to farmers and merchants, and to be accepted, you had to be here for a long time. But my dad changed all that because he had charisma, just like my son does. I don't, but those two generations do, and he charmed everybody. The farmers primarily, they loved him because he was helpful. He gave them great ideas. He helped to form the Maryland Virginia Milk Producers Association, and he taught me a lot of things. He taught me about the Golden Rule, and we went to Hamilton Baptist Church, and I learned all that. And then I learned later the other Golden Rule, which is, well, the Golden Rule from the Bible is treat others as you would treat them, or you would have them treat you. And the other rule is that he who has the gold rules. And I took those two examples through my career. And I also learned from my father that you have to treat people right, of course, but you have to listen. And he listened. I enjoyed traveling around with him to the different farms. Arthur Godfrey had a big farm, and he had all these animals, and that was fascinating growing up. He had the Godfrey Field right down in downtown Leesburg, and he taught me that if you're honest with people and you treat them right, you'll be a success. And I've carried that with me. I've tried to pass that on to Bryan, and he's taken it to an even better level.
So you grew up, so the Loudoun farm community, and the dairy farms were everywhere, cattle farms were everywhere, wheat farms were everywhere.
There was nothing. There wasn't anything else other than the towns and the farms, and my father was probably as prominently known as any member of the Board of Supervisors would have been.
That was an important role in it.
At that time, it was, absolutely. And then, because there were a number of State Department and retired governmental folks who lived in Loudoun County, bought farms out here, he was recruited to go into the AID program, and we were sent to several of the garden spots of the world. We started out in Pakistan, and then Bangladesh, and then Nigeria. And I was 12 years old when he got his first assignment to Pakistan, and had to go to a missionary school because there weren't any schools in Pakistan that I could go to and graduate from. So I learned tremendous amount of how to get along with people who don't speak the same language you do. And I mention that because after a long journey, I came back and I ended up an interesting story why, but I won't go into it unless you ask me to. When I got to Leesburg, and after I spent some time in the Air Force, 5 years, Vietnam and the Mediterranean, went to law school, came back to Leesburg, and joined one of the major law firms here. And every time somebody who came in who didn't speak with a southern accent, or had some accent, they would say, "Woody, you take care of this person." And so some of my best clients, Rudolph and Rhea, was one of those. And I was very fortunate to have to be involved in a law firm that they were all trial lawyers, and they expected me to be a trial lawyer. And of course, anytime anything unusual came up, I just graduated from law school. They said, "Well, send it to Woody." And one of those was the hospital. So anyway, I digress, and I've probably gone far afield of your question.
That's right. So how, as a growing up in the farm community, then getting experience overseas, and then to Vietnam,
Right.
What made you pursue law? What was that path? What was your thinking?
Well, I wasn't sure whether I was going to make the Air Force a career or not, and I was stationed in Crete, Greece, at a listening station, intelligence gathering station in Heraklion, Crete, and they only had one lawyer on that was the JAG lawyer, and there were a number of troops that were stationed there, and some of them got into trouble. And when they would prosecute them, our Constitution, of course, says you have to have a lawyer. Well, I wasn't a lawyer. The JAG officer was a lawyer, so he had to present the case. He said, "What do you can do this under the Article 15 rules and regulations. You don't have to be a lawyer to prosecute the case. So I'll be here. I'll meet the constitutional requirements. I'll be the airman or the enlisted people's attorney to meet the constitutional requirements, and you can prosecute the case." And I just enjoyed that. It was a relationship that brought me into the how to be a lawyer.
Yeah, so many people join the service or serve and learn a skill.
Yeah.
Would you have expected going to Vietnam to learn to be a lawyer?
No, but I will tell you that I learned as much from the 5 years I was in the Air Force as I ever learned in law school. And I appreciate the fact that I had civilian experience outside of just being a lawyer. A lot of lawyers go right from college to law school, and they miss, I think, the opportunity to learn what the real world is like.
All right, so you set up practice. So when I met you in 1988, I think you had your own practice at that point?
Yes, right. By 1988 I did.
So I met you at my first sports supervisors meeting.
Right.
And I had just joined the Loudoun Gazette, and as a cub reporter, one of the first things they do is they give you a story to write to see if you can write anything. So I took a staff report about the Cablevision franchise application. And there was a business that was going to bring cable television to Eastern Loudoun. Right. Because in those days, only Leesburg had cable television. So I wrote that story, and it was a big deal. And then at that first meeting, somebody taps me on the back of my shoulder and says, "Hey, I saw your story on Cablevision. There's more to the story." My phone's ringing. Just make sure it doesn't snap off. There's more to the story, and that's when we met. And you and Mark Weiss and some people were trying to put cable television in Western Loudoun, running cables between all the towns at a very low density that most investors probably wouldn't have taken on.
Right. They wouldn't have, and we felt like Western Loudoun needed to have cable television, and the only way to get it there was to set up a competing company that got the franchises. And we went to each town. We got a franchise from each one of them, and I guess Mid-Atlantic with Cable was the name of our company, but the company that had Leesburg said, "We can't let these guys do that." So they ended up taking the franchises that we've got, and they actually brought cable, which is a good thing because we didn't know much about how to run a cable company. We knew how to get franchises. And all the Western Loudoun towns got cable service as a result of that. But there's part of that I will never forget. You did. I think you were I was the person that tapped you on the shoulder, right? Okay. Yeah. And I said, I think there's a more interesting story here than what you just got from other people. I said, can we let you come into our meetings and and see how we go about doing this? And we invited you in, and I don't remember what the arrangement was, but you reported out what we were doing, and I learned a great deal about about community communications and messaging from that experience from you. So thank you, sir.
But then we were from that meeting. That was the time, an important time in Loudoun County planning. So, in my interest at that time was really planning and zoning. That was my specialty, and went into what we call the vision hearings.
Right.
We had the board of supervisors was newly elected to stop growth, and we had a downzoning plan, and that turned into community meetings with thousands of people filling school auditoriums. And that's again when your farmer connections came back, because you became a voice for some of those farmers.
That's right. The farmers had planned on their property being their retirement plan. They knew that the value of their property would probably increase with all the development that was beginning to occur in Loudoun County. And the Board of Supervisors was going to take that away from them by downzoning it to probably 20% of its value had they done that. So we formed a couple of organizations. Farmers Resolve was one of those. We thought the preservationists were also pushing to downzone property around some of the historic sites, and we were concerned about that, representing some of the farmers who were going to be impacted. And but can I go back just in two things that sort of lead up to that? First of all, when I graduated from law school, took the bar, got sworn in Richmond at the Supreme Court, came back to Leesburg. The next day, the senior partner said, "Woody, there's a guy here who's charged with violating the building code, and he's got to be in court day after tomorrow. I'd like you to represent him because I don't know." They didn't know anything about the building code, so I learned that. I did a little research, and I found out that my client was certainly guilty, and there was no defense. So then I said, well, let's take a look at what the Board of Supervisors did. Did they advertise this properly like they're supposed to under the law? I'd just taken a bar exam, so I knew all this stuff. And lo and behold, they didn't advertise the building code. So I immediately raised that. The judge said, case dismissed. You can't charge someone for a code that's not properly approved by the Board of Supervisors.
Was Judge Penn?
This was Judge Aiken, who was in the
Judge Aiken, okay.
Yeah, he another story, but not enough time for it. Judge Aiken. But that certainly got the attention of the Board of Supervisors and the staff. Continually after that, I took on the Board of Supervisors on a number of cases, and I got the name of they called me the junkyard lawyer of zoning lawyers, and I wore that mantle with pride. And I did sue the county on a number of cases, landfills here and there. But you asked me about the farmers and how I got involved in that. So after that case, the county had proposed to put a landfill where the landfill is now, and there were 4 or 5 houses right next to where the landfill was going to be, and they said, we're going to condemn these 3, but the other one, the 4th one, is just too far away. We're not going to condemn that one, but we'll let that property suffer the damage of being right next to the landfill. Well, I filed suit against the county, which increased my reputation as being a junkyard lawyer, and we ended up settling that case. And I'll come back to that in terms of what's going on with the data center industry in just a minute. But the zoning law I first learned about when I was growing up in Hamilton. I was in the 4-H club. I had some chickens. My parents had, my dad and mom had bought a 1-acre lot right in the middle of Hamilton. And they had a few cows, and I had the chickens from the 4-H project. And my dad decided, he'd grown up on a farm, and he decided that he wanted to raise some chickens, but a few more than I did. So he put up a chicken house for about 400 chickens. And I think if you check, I think that Hamilton is the first town that organized and got approved the zoning ordinance right after that. So I learned a little bit about zoning from the other end of it. Anyway, so I digressed again, so you'll have to bring me back to the question.
Well, I think, the issues that you were dealing with in those, balancing, preserving Loudoun County, and protecting the interests of farmers, that's their whole equity. That still continues today.
Yeah, well, there's one more part of that I forgot to mention, and that is the county has done some really good things and some really dumb things. And one of the dumb things they did that generated the cult formation of the Loudoun Coalition of Towns was they were looking for another location for the landfill in addition to one they had. And they came up with a proposal to put a new landfill at the southwest corner of 287 and Route 9. And Hamilton was aghast at that. Percival was aghast at that. I represented Round Hill and Lovettsville as their town attorneys, and so we got together and said, let's take on the county. They can't do that. So we formed the mayors of all those towns got together. They formed cults, and I learned from that if you can bring people together who have a common interest, that's the best way to deal with something that the Board of Supervisors is proposing. So we had that battle. That also enhanced my reputation. We didn't have to file suit because we hired a hydrologist who went and did some surveys and found out that the largest aquifer in western Loudoun was right below where the landfill was being proposed by the county. Anyway, I digress.
And COLT is still playing an important role today. They meet every month, and they the board of supervisors listen to what they have to say.
Right, they do. They do. Right.
The other thing that you're deeply involved in is healthcare. So farming to healthcare, and you were really on the front of trying to. You're working for the hospital. Right? The hospital is an independent community hospital. The managed care companies, the insurance companies were coming in and cutting rates for what they were going to pay, and the hospitals really had to come up with a new business plan to deal with that stuff.
Right.
And you were involved in that.
I was. Well, again, when a couple days after I started practicing, there was something going on at the hospital, and senior partner said to me, he said, Woody, I don't know anything about healthcare. They got some problems. Would you go over and go to the board meeting and see if you can help them out? And that evolved to the hospital became. I had developers on one side and the hospital and healthcare on the other side, in terms of the major things that I was doing. And so what happened was the doctors said, we need a new hospital, and the managed care companies were saying to all the businesses that had healthcare insurance or provided healthcare to they would go to the healthcare to the businesses and say, we can save you 50% of what you're now paying if you sign us all up. And they'd sign probably half of the population up under managed care contracts. Then they would go to the hospital and they would say, here are all your patients, and here's what you have to pay us because they're insured by us, and that created a tremendous problem for the hospital. I won't go into all the details, but yes, that was a huge issue. So the doctors wanted a new hospital. The managed care companies wanted lower rates, and one of the things that I had to do for the hospital was to locate a new location for the hospital. that I worked along with Mark Weiss and a couple other professionals to help the hospital find the best location. Well, the best location was probably Broadlands, but the toll road hadn't been built yet, so we ended up saying by default, Lansdowne is probably the best place to go. So,
To say that finding a new location for the hospital was not a popular project.
the people in Western Loudoun thought we were abandoning them to serve those people in the east. And the divide, I mean, anybody who's been in Loudoun County knows that the east is the east and the west is the west, and the cultural differences are pretty astounding. But yeah, we had to fight to get the hospital approved with the COPN application. And not long after we got the hospital built, HCA came in, as they had done all over the country, buying up the local hospitals and then shutting them down. They came in and said, you had the right idea to begin with. Broadlands is the place there ought to be a new hospital, so we'll build one here. Well, we spent 5.5, 6 years. By that time, the hospital said, Woody, you don't have time for any more of your clients. We need you full-time at the hospital.
Mm.
So I took, after 20 years in private practice, it was a good time to make a move. The economy wasn't doing so well, and my development clients were not getting anything done. So I said, okay, 3 years sabbatical would be a good thing. And so I ended up representing the hospital full time. Was there, and that was more management and public relations and governmental relations than it was legal. There were many times when we had an administrator or a president who left to go somewhere else, and the board of directors of the hospital frequently said, "Woody, you need to keep an eye on things till we hire somebody else." So that's another episode.
And then, ultimately, the years-long fight to block the hospital, Broadlands won, so they went down to Route 50, and then Loudoun Hospital merged with Inova. And that's something I know you were involved with well. I mean, we had many arguments about whether that was a good idea or not, but I think you were right. And in the end, we can see what's come out of that. Right? The services we have now are nothing.
We have a world-class hospital in Lansdowne right now. We would not have had, if we not moved it there, we would not have had that if we had not merged with Inova. And we certainly wouldn't have had it if a competing hospital was built 5 miles down the road. And those were all fights, all 3 of those fights. I was the spear, I guess, leading a lot of that.
So look, at the time, it was difficult to see, but looking back, I mean, those were pivotal moments for this community.
I would agree. There were pivotal moments for the community, and there were certainly pivotal moments for my career.
And another thing to touch on, so sounds like you were, as a young lawyer, even as a young lawyer, you were just thrown into a bunch of circumstances that maybe no one else took on. But in your practice, I mean, you've worked with mentored many lawyers as well. Maybe not the same style, throwing them into unknown territory, but Mark Herring is one who went on to become the Attorney General. How did you make that connection, or what did you see in him early on?
Well, I was a tennis fan, and I was a member of the tennis club in Leesburg, and one of the managers there happened to be Mark Herring's mother, and he was in, I guess, his 3rd or 4th year in college, and she said he was looking for a job as a summer intern. So I was still with the old firm before I set up my new practice, and I convinced them that we would hire him. And of course, the other partner said, "Well, you're in charge of him. You have to tell him what to do and what not to do." Well, we were just in the throes of data entry. That's how we manage things before we got all the technical stuff that we have now. And I said, well, I think we have a lot of data entry work that needs to be done. Our secretaries are all busy. So we hired Mark, and that's what he did. And then the next year and every year after that, we had something for him to do. And then he went to law school. I thought he was a brilliant student, and offered him a job after he completed law school, and he graciously accepted it, and very quickly became a partner in the law firm. And after a couple of years, he decided he needed to go into politics, and I was the Darth Vader. That was my reputation with the Piedmont Environmental Council, and Mark was representing the preservationists and the folks that wanted to not necessarily down zone, but he couldn't have a law partner like me if he was going to run for a board of supervisors. So we had a very friendly exit. That's about the same time that the hospital said, "Woody, we need you full time." So we remained very close and very, very good friends. After a number of years, I guess it was 5 or 6, 7, I decided that I was supposed to have 2 or 3 years as a sabbatical. I ended up with 7 years with the hospital, and then when the merger took place, we negotiated that, and then Nova kept me on as a consultant. I finally decided I didn't want to drive to Fairfax all the times where Nova's headquarters is. So I reestablished my private practice, and I needed a home for it. And to get back to Bryan, I always felt that nepotism was not a good thing. People have asked me for advice about it, and I don't think I would have hired him, but Mark did. While I was with the hospital,
Okay.
Mark hired Bryan. He became his paralegal and office manager. And when I decided it was time for me to go back into private practice, I thought, well, no reason why I couldn't sign up with Mark. So I became a partner with Mark again, only it was his firm this time. And Mark was he was his right arm, and I certainly didn't argue about that. Certainly I wouldn't have hired him, but I certainly couldn't hire him. So so that's how that relationship got reestablished.
So growing up as a teenager or a kid, you see Lawyer and Bryan?
I did not, but he was a heck of a good soccer player and tennis player, and he was an excellent office manager. And when Mark went in to run for Attorney General, he won, and I had counted on joining Mark's firm again as sort of my entry into retirement. And then when Mark won the election and became Attorney General, it was me and Bryan and one other lawyer, and we said, what are we going to do? So we reorganized and started up again, and Bryan he knew more about the clients than anybody else. I mean, he was the right arm. So that's how that evolved.
So what drew you to law? When did you know you were interested in that?
Well, I think I knew probably for a long time, even when I was a kid. And maybe I didn't express it to my dad, but one of the big reasons is because I saw what he was doing. I saw how he was advocating on behalf of the community, how people respected him, and how he was helping people. And internally, I thought that is something that I would like, that I'd like to do myself. He had a great reputation, worked very hard, and loved what he did. So that's really, I think that started as a child, and then I went to Virginia Tech, and after I graduated, I knew how much it took to go to law school and to get a law degree and become licensed, and I just did not feel at that point in time that I was mentally prepared to take that responsibility on. so I decided I applied with Mark. Mark had just was a supervisor and needed some help, and so he graciously took me on.
So, but you didn't go to law school, right? So you took this very interesting road that very few people do. You read the law, so your local mentors that walked you through this.
That's right, and I think a lot of my background was extremely helpful for the law reader program I had with Mark's paralegal for 10 plus years. I'd seen my father practice for my entire life. And I was at the point where I knew I wanted to obtain my law license, but I had to really figure out what's the best way of doing that. And I had a family, and I couldn't take off the entire time. And so I looked at the program, and I was like, what does it involve? And it is something that I thought was something I could accomplish while I continued to work, at least part-time. And so I applied for the program, and it is very regimented. It's administered by the Board of Bar Examiners. It's a 3-year course. You have a supervising attorney. One of my mentors, Rhonda Pace, who's now my current law partner, was my supervising attorney. So we spent 3 years together, took 6 courses every year, had quarterly exams that were submitted to the Board of Bar Examiners. The board asked for extra credit, things to do on your free time, which is not much, but I did an internship with Loudoun Circuit Court under Judge Fleming, which was extremely helpful, and I learned a lot from that experience. Then I also was a scholarship recipient of the Local Government Attorneys Association. I got to work with Leo Rogers quite a bit, and that relationship has evolved over time, even when my practice had started up. And then I took the MPRE, which is a multi-state professional responsibility exam, and I passed that. And then I spent essentially 3 months nonstop studying for the bar exam. And I think a lot of people spend time on this, but I had to be extremely disciplined in it, because when you look at the statistics for the law reader program, it's about a 20% pass rate for those that take on that program. And I knew that going in, and I didn't want the last 3 years of my life to go down the drain. So I worked extremely hard to make sure I passed, and I did on my first attempt. While I was studying, I think because it's not so well known, people did find out about the unique path I was taking. I had a great experience as I was studying for the bar upstairs. Congresswoman Jennifer Wexton came in and brought me a Barbary book with the Congress of Libraries stamped on the side. And it was very meaningful to me, and was very gracious, and she wished me the best of luck. And so it was just great to see people see what I was doing. And so I took the bar. This was studying December 19 to February 2020. That's all I was thinking of. And I took the bar in February of 2020, and I came out, and little did I know that I was coming out in the middle of a pandemic. And so my law practice started at an unusual time, and I got the results in, I believe, April. And then in May, we had a remote swearing in, and at that swearing in, I had my 3 big mentors in life, which is Rhonda and Mark and my dad. So it was a really good experience.
Yeah. What's the difference in experience between the process you went through and maybe a typical law school? It seems to be you're making more local connections, and you're...
There are certainly pluses and minuses. The fact that I'm here within the community, I know, been able to meet a lot of people and interact with people. I always tell when people ask about the program, I always tell them the hardest part of it is that there's no basis for comparison. So I'm taking these exams for 3 years, and there's nobody else taking those same exams. I had Rhonda saying, "Oh, you're doing a great job, but I didn't really know what that meant. compared to somebody else. Whereas law school, obviously you get your, everyone's taking the same exam, and so you have some basis for comparison. And so that was a difficult aspect of it, but just being regimented and doing the same routine was helpful. I didn't have the opportunities like mock trials because I'm the only one. But I did have a lot of support, and I there was a number of attorneys that I could speak with. I would get real live controversies that I could see play out. So I would read from essentially 9 in the morning to 1 in the afternoon, and then I would go downstairs to my dad's law firm and I'd work there from 1 to 5. And so I actually had pretty much double the training that you would have during the program.
So it's not a path that you would recommend for everybody?
No, I think it's if you got the means and the time to do law school, that's the tried and true approach. I do feel it's geared for paralegals that have been in the field for a while, and people that have some sort of background in the law.
And then you followed up, you wrote a book about it. So what's the purpose of this, or what made you take this extra step?
Well, as I mentioned, the pass rate for the bar is very, very low. And over the years, people ask me, well, how were you successful in passing the bar and getting through the program? And so I thought the best way of doing that would be to write a guidebook that details all the processes of the law reader program, but also what I did throughout that time and how I got through each step of it. And I haven't really advertised it too much, but I did. I gave copies to everyone that kind of helped me along the way. And at some point, I think I'll try and get it out there a little bit more.
So now, full circle, you're at the heart of many of the community debates that Woody would have been doing, did all his career. So right now, through your connection with Lansdowne, you've come to the front line of data centers and power lines. What's that journey been like?
Well, first, I've got to say how fortunate and grateful I am to get to have these clients. A lot of it was born through Woody, but I've worked hard to establish myself as somebody that my clients can trust, and I think for the most part I've done that, and I've got some very good people I work with, both in advocacy fronts and land use matters and whatever the case is, but I always go in making sure I know what the facts are and advocating. And if you asked me 4 years ago if I would be doing what I'm doing now, I would look at you very funny and say, no way. But approximately 4 years ago, as I was Lansdowne's general counsel, the property manager there came up and said, hey Brian, we got a request from Dominion to put 185-foot transmission poles on Lansdowne properties. Just want to let you know that. I was like, okay, well, thank you for letting me know. So the first thing I did, of course, was I went to the board and I said, board, there's this proposal to bring these lines down Lansdowne property, and at that point, the board tasked me with looking into what all the facts were and establishing a group to ensure that transmission lines, were mitigated to the best that they could be, and that evolved quite substantively. We looked at pretty much every land record, every aspect of what the SEC looks at in these proceedings, where there could be better options, and what would be the most beneficial outcome for the community. And with that evolved an underground plan. And the underground plan we knew was difficult, but it was either that or it was either underground or on the other side of Route 7, on the Lansdowne side or the Belmont side, and neither of those options were great. and it was worth pursuing to underground. And what we were trying to do was extremely difficult because, for context, there's been one 500,000 volt line buried in the United States. That's in Chino Hills, California. But Lansdowne and eventually the county, who we advocated to join us in the proceedings, said yes, we agree. We need to mitigate the impacts if we can. That was to go back to what Woody said. That we turned over every stone. We talked to every neighborhood. We talked to every advocacy group, and we put on an extremely compelling case. Unfortunately, they didn't rule for undergrounding. They did rule in favor of not going on Lansdowne, which was, ultimately our the main purpose of what I was hired to do. But it was disappointing, and so we did appeal that, and we appealed it as a by right appeal to the Virginia Supreme Court, and I argued along the county's attorney in 2026, just passed in February. So it was a good experience.
That's another thing you might didn't expect to be arguing for the Supreme Court. Right?
No, it was. I just I was thinking mostly land use, and a lot of actually what we're doing is land use strategy and how can we use land use to help determine a route.
But going ahead, I mean, in the months and maybe years ahead, I mean, the work that you guys are doing in Loudoun County here or Loudoun Valley States, working with the county, is going to really set policy for communities across Virginia or across the country.
Yeah, absolutely. And the one thing I love most about this is that I'm advocating for what I think is good for our community. I grew up in Loudoun County, as you know, and I love it here. I want to make sure our community is a place that preserves the quality of life, while also acknowledging that we have data centers and they do some good things, and and they're here to for the long run, and we just need to work together. And so it's my hope that each one of these cases pushes things in the right direction. And I think we established that with Lansdowne. I think things are better now. We have it's never going to be perfect, but we pushed the needle in the right direction, and that's continued with other cases.
You may become a junkyard lawyer of Davidson.
Yes, well, I think, as Woody said, I'll take that badge as a badge of honor, because I do think it's important that we be involved and we protect the citizens and do what's best for everyone.
I appreciate the conversation. There's one more common link that you guys have that I want to touch on. That's just the support for community journalism. So Woody, you were involved back in the Lake Birds days early on, and we're a supporter in that. And now, Brian, this year you're the chair of Live Community Media, which is Loudoun Now. So how did that connection work start for you, Woody?
Well, when Leesburg Today, I guess that's what it was originally called, when Brett Phillips started it up and hired you, I don't know how you got from where you were to begin with to Leesburg Today, but I have followed your career for all the years that you've been here, and I have to say that the county would not be the same. It wouldn't be as good. What you've done, somebody ought to interview you because Norm, you're the voice of Loudoun County, and you have been for so many years. And I've got to say, I'm so proud of you. And when Leesburg Today started, they brought in, and I think the same is true today, supporters, investors, donors from every segment of the community that you can imagine. I mean, it's a well-rounded, it's not just preservationists, it's not just businesses, it's a combination of all of those. And one of the things that they ran into was that they needed funding to be able to do all the things that Leesburg Today wanted to do. And I don't know how I got involved, but Maybe it was one of those things that it was going to be difficult, so they said, well, Woody's the one that does all the hard stuff. Um, and, um, and so I helped them figure out how they could market, how they could go out and entice people to invest in Leesburg today. And there was a loophole in the law that allowed Leesburg today to be able to do that without having to without violating the
So you became we were able to share shares to the community of people who lived or worked here.
Right.
For, I forget what it was, $20 a share or
Right.
whatever.
right.
And so, and Brett used to say, we're just like the Green Bay Packers, we're owned by the community.
Yeah, and that was true, and it still is. So I'm just delighted that Leesburg today, and then all the iterations that occurred, is still around, and I attribute that to you, and to other people who have financially supported it over the years. If it weren't for some of the major donors, we wouldn't have the benefit of the kind of journalism that we get from Loudoun Now.
And now, so now as a nonprofit, it's a different, we've been to quite a few business models over the years. As a nonprofit, even at different challenges. And why did you join the board and get involved?
Well, absolutely. So let's kind of, I want to back up to kind of where I kind of got involved from the inception, which was Woody was the registered agent of Amendment 1 Loudoun, which was the for-profit arm. And local news journalism is extremely important, but we were at a point in time where it was not really profitable. And there was a big problem at that time, and one of our local leaders, who's been extremely supportive of the local news, is the Honorable Joe T. May, and his daughter Elaine asked me to help establish a nonprofit arm that could somehow be incorporated. And so I think 2022 or 2023, we established the nonprofit. And over time, we determined that, I think in 2024, that was the right time to essentially transfer or for the Loudoun Community Media to acquire the for-profit aspect of the paper, which allowed us to really look at the bigger community, our donors. We have a lot of really good people that know how important local news is, and the community embraced it. And it was something that Joe and Elaine were extremely proud of. I had worked with them, and Joe asked me to join the board. And then, of course, it was something that we felt comfortable doing because we had somebody like you that was kind of leading the way. And that's evolved over the past couple of years into something that's been really, really good. There's always challenges. But we are now, I would say, on pretty good footing, and we have some really good donors that are working with us. We've got great staff, it's my hope, and I'm sure yours, that we continue to be able to provide local journalism for years to come.
And we know that the nonprofit model is probably the future for journalism in many communities, maybe everywhere. There's more and more money. Marketing money, advertising money gets sucked out and goes to California, to the tech companies. We have to find a way to fund the newsroom. And so, having the support of you and the other donors really lets us power that up and keep doing what we're doing. Without that, we couldn't do that. So, I think the things we're doing and trying, we're sort of on the front edge of a lot of ideas to make this work. And so, we just really need to support people.
Yeah. And I think that goes to the name, Loudoun Community Media. It's the community that supports us and keeps us going, and grateful for it. And there's a few other nonprofits I work with. They're all extremely valuable, but Amendment 1, freedom of press, it's so important, and it's worth fighting for and preserving.
Well, thank you both. always enjoyed working with Woody over the years, and we'll look forward to seeing what trouble you get into as we push this camp forward and try to build a stronger community. So I appreciate it. So happy Father's Day to you both.
Thank you. Thank you, Norm.